This is the Believe in Texans podcast alongside former Houston Texans wide receiver, six-year NFL veteran Cecil III. I'm Patrick Creighton, the host of Area 45 on Sports Radio 610, your flagship home of the Houston Texans. And Cecil, the Texans get a victory despite really only playing the majority of their offensive starters for one drive.
Mm.
They get a victory in pretty sound fashion over the fake Oilers. And by the way, your thoughts on the fact that maybe the fake Oilers 0-3 against the Houston Texans, 0-2 on the field, 0-1 in the broadcast booth, where they broke away from the game for an inset of the same game for J.J. Watt to troll their asses.
It was terrible. It was terrible. And JJ did a hell of a job with the troll. Like, I thought that was clean. I thought he did a great job just handling that whole situation. But that was terrible, man. It was just all the way off.
You know, what's funny is when I first moved down here 12 years ago, a lot of former Oilers players had said to me they kind of felt like a man without a country, right? They weren't part of the Texans franchise. And there was only so many limited things Texans could do with them because they're not part of that franchise. But the Titans didn't really do anything with the former players all that much. They had retired some numbers, but they didn't really do a lot of events with the former players. And they kind of felt like I don't really have a team anymore.
Mhm.
But recently, the Titans have kind of embraced the Oilers' heritage that once upon a time they rejected. And not just they rejected, their fans rejected. They were the Tennessee Oilers for 2 years. Their fans hated it. They didn't want to be the Tennessee Oilers. They wanted to be Tennessee something them, not what they used to be in Houston.
Right.
So most the fans didn't want to be the Oilers. But now here they are. They got the Oilers unis out, and they're going on social media. Hey, this is our new picture, and it's a picture of the Oilers logo with the oil derrick, and all around Nissan Stadium. They've got Oilers all around the sides, and then they're wearing the Oilers colors. And recently, they've kind of really embraced the Oilers history and the uniforms and all that, and can only wonder why. Why is it now when the Texans seem to have a lot going for them, and the Titans they're a bottom feeder. Now all of a sudden, hey, we need to embrace our history because
Mm.
you know what? There's money.
Mm.
And if we can't sell all our tickets or we can't get people to really embrace the team because we stink, we can get them to buy old jerseys.
Mm.
It does seem rather convenient money grab by that bitch, Amy Adams Strunk, who always goes by that bitch, Amy Adams Strunk. And it's a convenient money grab for her and for a family that has kind of always looked for the money grab. People who may remember that Bud Adams once upon a time demanded over $100 million in renovations to the Astrodome. And the city gave them to him. And then just a couple of years later, okay, now I need a whole new stadium.
Mm.
It's like we just gave you all the renovations you wanted. We haven't come close to paying that off. And now, screw that. Now you want a whole new stadium. He didn't care. It wasn't his money. He was going to hold up the city for whatever he could get. And when the city wouldn't give it to him, he found another city that would.
Mm.
So, yeah, the Adams family can kind of get shot into the sun. I'm okay with that.
They're so petty just for even trying to do that 2 years in a row. Like it's if you're not going to appreciate the history, like you mentioned in the past, you've never done anything with the history of the Oilers, and now because it can be beneficial to you, you're starting to lean that way because it can bring some type of attention to the city, some type of attention to the team. To me, it's just like, come on, man. It's interesting though. It's interesting because they got the number one pick now, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, they're gonna pick number one and blow it, which is okay because that's what they do.
Not the
Um,
number one pick now.
did you you saw last year where they sued UH over their jerseys,
No,
which
I didn't know.
which they
I didn't
never
know they
sold.
sued.
They never sold. They had the NFL send them a cease and desist over infringement because UH did a uh, H Town Blue, we're going to call it,
Right, I remember
because
that jersey. Yep.
the Queen of Houston, Miss Hannah McNair, decreed the color is
Mhm.
H Town Blue, not Columbia Blue,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
they created a jersey in that color, which they never sold, they never marketed, and the Titans had them serve with the C&D.
Okay, so I didn't know the Titans were behind that. I seen the
Yeah.
NFL did something, but I didn't know the Titans were
The
behind. That's
Titans are
interesting.
behind it. They're the ones who went and said, hey, we need to enforce this here because so many people in the world might confuse the Houston Cougars with the Tennessee Titans. They're very, very similar. You might
That's
confuse
crazy.
a college team with a pro team. I could totally see how that would happen.
That's crazy. And I believe it says Cougars right here.
Yes.
On the front of the jersey.
And I am being the fa and the facetious here. So it's one of those things that just it's a family that has really done everything that it can to make the city of Houston want to boil them in oil.
Mm.
And I'm okay with boiling them in oil. Peanut oil, vegetable oil, motor oil, I don't care. Boil them. Boil them all. But let's get to this game because on Sunday, Texans played their starters for one series. CJ Stroud was 6 for 6. They moved the ball down the field with relative ease, overcame a penalty at the 1 yard line, punched it into the end zone, and looked like the offense that they're supposed to look like. And everybody was yucking and yawking and having a good time and celebrating and whatnot. But this is still the Tennessee Titans, the fake Oilers. And they're not a bad defense, but they're still the fake Oilers. How much of that first drive do you look at and say, that can be built off of this is a positive thing versus, yeah, that's the fake Oilers. Now you're playing in Chargers.
You definitely could build off of it. Like that's something you ideally that's what you wanted. That's what D'Amico had in his mind. Okay, let's go down the field. Let's drive. Let's score a touchdown. Let's finish in the end zone. Great job by CJ and Nico connecting a few times, and then they just looked really efficient. They looked really good on offense, right? And I think that's what you wanted. But at the same time, if I'm honest, and I've been in the Tennessee Titans shoes before, meaning there's nothing to play for after that week. You cannot wait to get on the plane to head home or to Aruba or wherever you're going. Yes, during the season they weren't a bad defense, but does not mean they weren't a bad defense yesterday, right? So it's a different mindset you have at the end of the year. You want to finish strong if you're the Titans, like I get that, but you're not playing for much. So the fights, the hunger is just not the same as it was if it was week 10 or week 8 or week 4, right? But it's something that Texans can definitely build off of. It's something I'm hoping that they can get some momentum going into a tough Chargers defense that's coming to town on Saturday afternoon. But they're gonna need a lot more than one good series. Like it's gonna be a hard fought game. We talked about it off camera. um, I didn't realize how good the Chargers defense was when it comes to scoring defense, when it comes to red zone defense, when it comes to third down. These guys are legit. So it's a good start, something to build off of, definitely a confidence booster. But you will need to put multiple drives like that together to get a win on Saturday.
And as you mentioned, this Chargers defense, number one defense in the NFL, scoring defense. They are number one in the red zone, right?
Mm.
When number one, they give the fewest points per game. And number two, when they get into the red zone, they buckle down and they find ways to keep teams out of the end zone. And, you think Derwin James is a terrific safety. He's a guy who can really impact plays. You've got a couple of guys, one in Khalil Mack, who to me is definitely a future Hall of Famer.
Oh, he's
Joey Bosa maybe a future Hall of Famer.
Mhm.
And Tui Tupolatu, I have no idea if I said that right. Tui Polatu, that's a mouthful and a half. He had 8.5 sacks. He's their leading sack guy. But you certainly have guys who can get after the quarterback. And, protecting the quarterback has kind of been something the Texans have been really lousy at this year. And, Laramie Tunsil only gave up 2 sacks all year. But Blake Fisher has only played a handful of games, and he gave up a sack against Baltimore that wound up sending CJ to the sideline for a play or two because, wound up with a little shoulder injury there. And he got back into the game, but still, your quarterback got beat up and suffered a minor injury he didn't need to have because, your rookie tackle, well, he's a rookie tackle. He doesn't have a lot of reps, and it showed. So there are certainly some questions offensively. Joe Mixon had a terrific season, over 1,000 yards despite all the games that he missed.
He's awesome.
Dameon Pierce, who, got dusted off, breaks off a 92-yard touchdown run that Joe Mixon is so excited about. He's running down the sideline with Dameon Pierce, jumps on him in the end zone, gets himself a 15-yard penalty for, guy on the bench coming on to celebrate. That's a no-no in the No Fun League, by the way. And gets their extra point pushed back to like a 42-yard extra point, which as long as it's 40 yards plus, Kaimi has no problems hitting. But your thoughts on Joe Mixon, the running game? Will we see a little more Dameon Pierce? It's really kind of been Joe Mixon as the one ball carrier. They ride Joe Mixon, from pillar to post. Do you think we will see a little more Dameon Pierce, or will they stick with Joe Mixon all the time?
I think I have to go off what we've seen the last 3 or 4 months, right? I do think that they'll stick with Joe for 95% of the snaps, 95% of the ball carriers for the carries, excuse me. And Joe's proven he can do it. He's proven he can be that guy. I think the biggest thing is, can the O-line really make holes and block this D-line and these linebackers enough that Joe can find a hole and find a seam and hit. If Joe gets in rhythm, man, he's tough to stop and tough to bring down. I'm going back to a Green Bay game. When he gets in rhythm, man, it doesn't matter if the guy gets back there first. Like he can make a guy miss. He can break the first tackle. He can get yards after the contact. But it's going to be critical that they develop these holes and get to the right spot on the defensive line so that he's able to see the cutback lanes. He's able to see, okay, where can I attack this zone? Because if Joe gets going, he can really make some headway. Now, I get the excitement you get from Dameon Pierce, but again, that's going against a Tennessee team that was checked out. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to take too much away from that game. Just being honest with you, because that team was checked out, man. I've been on that too many teams like that before, Pat. Too many teams in my career I've been on before where I've seen like, hey, end of the last year of the game, nothing happened after that. We're trying to get through it healthy. Nobody wants to get hurt. You get through it healthy, boom. You're playing hard, but it's just not the same as if it was week 7, week 9, week 13. So even though Dameon did well and he's doing what he's supposed to be doing, continue to show flashes that you can still play to help him in his career, I think Joe will get 98% of the carries on this upcoming Saturday.
No, and I guess I'm not with you on that. I know that it was great to see Dameon get that big run, and I mean, hell, he had almost his whole year's worth of rushing. He matched it in one game, and it was good to see him get reps and be successful. But we talked about this last week. They are who they are, and they're not going to suddenly change their stripes. So I think it's great to see that Dameon can find a role in this offense if he's asked to. But I don't expect him to be asked to unless something goes wrong with Joe Mixon, or Joe has his own 78-yard run that he needs to go get the oxygen tank afterwards. And okay, right. We got to put Dameon in, or they put it in Dari for only if it's third down though. They go to Dari, but I still think it's going to be Joe Mixon pretty much all the time. Deontay Johnson got his first game reps with the Houston Texans and had a couple of catches, not a lot of yards, had a couple of catches, 4 targets. Your thoughts on what you saw from Deontay Johnson and what kind of an impact you think he could have going into the wild card round against the Chargers?
I like what I've seen. I just want to see him get reps, right? I wanted to see more reps with CJ. I get he only played the series. CJ only played the series, the first offense. But the fact that Deontay was in there for a good amount of reps, in my opinion, was really good. He's a really good route runner. Like he was running routes hard. He was getting open. He was creating separation. So I expect him to have some type of impact on Saturday. Now, what is still yet to be seen. But I do think he can make some plays for you and help you. And to be honest, to beat the Chargers, I think he's going to have a decent game, whether that's 3 or 4 catches, a couple big first downs, just making plays when his number is called. I'm not saying he'll get 10 to 12 targets, but if he can be productive in the 3 to 6 target range and make some critical plays in some critical moments, I think he can be a huge help because you're gonna need all hands on deck against this defense. But I like what I've seen from Deontay. I think if he continues to play this way, he might earn a spot on the team for next season. So I like what I've seen from him. Some really, really good routes. Now I'm a big route runner guy. If a guy can create separation from a defensive back or a safety, I'm buying in on you. And I think he's a guy that can do that consistently. He has been for his 6 or 7 years in the league. So I'm excited to see him Saturday. He should be able to make an impact in which they need him to really get some points on the board and possibly win.
Cecil, they mentioned on the broadcast that while he was still in Carolina for those first, 4 or 5 games or whatnot, he was a top 10 receiver in the league at that time. And, winds up getting traded to Baltimore, where they had no intentions of using him as a starter. And the frustration boiled over. And he winds up essentially forcing himself off that team under less than auspicious terms. Comes to Houston. He said he wanted to be in Houston. Clearly has a path to being a starter.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly has a path, not just this year, but next year, path to being a starter. Is a guy who was considered coming into this year at least a top 25 receiver.
Mm-hmm.
If the mind is right, the head's in the right place, I'm with you. I think it absolutely makes sense to keep Deontay Johnson and bring him back as long as he understands, number one, Nico Collins is the guy.
Yeah.
You're not going to usurp Nico Collins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was saying is that Nico Collins reminds me so much of New York Giants era Plaxico Burress because
Really?
the size, the strength, the back shoulder catches. Every time you need that first down, he's the guy you go to.
Mm-hmm.
Need to get the score in the end zone, he's the guy you go to. He is uncoverable.
Mm-hmm.
And, there was a stretch there in New York where Plaxico Burress was that guy. He was uncoverable with the Giants. I'm not going to count the Jets years. With the Giants, every time Eli Manning needed a first down, Plaxico Burress.
Mm-hmm.
Need a score, Plaxico Burress. Back shoulder throw, Plaxico Burress. 50-50 ball, 100%, Plaxico Burress. Nico wins every contested ball. Nico wins contested ball when it's 1 versus 2, he wins contested balls.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the things that Plaxico did for the Giants when they were going to the Super Bowl. This is what Nico gives the Houston Texans. He is uncoverable. Now, I don't know if I can say Deontay Johnson is uncoverable, but he's a damn good route runner, like you said, and he's certainly a really good receiver. And to have an offense with Nico on one side and Deontay on the other side, that's a pretty damn good defense. A pretty good, big, good receiving core that defense is going to have a hard time with.
Mm-hmm.
And, the other side of this is, are you able to get Deontay Johnson at a discount because of the year that he had? Because of the fact that 3 teams, one he wanted to get off because they stunk. One was a really good team that's a Super Bowl contender that he wanted off of because he wasn't playing. He only had 39 snaps total as a Raven.
Oh, wow.
In 6 weeks, at 39 snaps. This is why he was so angry. And again, not the way to handle that, but I understand you're a guy who's been a top receiver in the league, for the last few years, and you can't get on the field. So I understand the frustration there. Again, didn't handle it right, but because of that, now he's here. As D'Amico said, clean start, clean slate. Not going to hold any of that against you. What you do here is what matters.
Yep.
And, D'Amico mentioned today, really liked what he's seen out of Deontay Johnson in practice. And, coaches, hey, I'm talking to a guy who's a coach, by the way. Coaches love what they see in practice. If you don't practice it, they don't expect you to play it. So for a guy who is giving the reps in practice and then going out and look, first, he had one series with CJ, and then they went to Davis Mills. We'll talk about him in a second. But Deontay Johnson, a guy that I think the Texans should absolutely be open to bringing back for next year, and then with a whole offseason in the program and a whole training camp with CJ Stroud. I think that might be the best / most cost-effective way of replacing the production from Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs.
I think he needs to have a clear understanding. Like, hey, we're still in the market for a receiver. Because I'm assuming they're going to draft one, right? That's normally draft a receiver, if not every year. You normally draft a receiver at least probably every single year in the draft. That's just how it goes, whether it's first or seventh round, whatever the case may be.
No, you have to with how I mean, look, there's so many great receivers come out every year. If you're not taking a receiver in the first 80 picks, you're doing it wrong.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So if he understands that, like, hey, they're going to draft a guy. If they bring me back, it'll be on that, not minimum deal, but it'll be definitely a discount from what you probably would get somewhere else if you had a good year. Nico's the number one. And then we need you, being the oldest in the room, possibly still there, right? We need you to be a mentor to the younger guys, to Nico, as he continues his superstardom, right? To other guys, like, hey, can you really be that glue in the receiver room to continue to help build what we're trying to do here, right? If he can do that, I'm all for it. I'm all for bringing him back. But if he can't, I think it's a conversation we need to have. Like, okay, listen, you were the man in Pittsburgh. You were the man in Charlotte or Carolina, excuse me. You're not going to be the man here. You can be an asset, but you're not going to be the number one guy. Are you okay with that? And if he's okay with that, I'm all for it.
I expressed that perfectly. He's got to be okay with Nico being the guy.
Yep.
And look, I don't think Tank Dell is going to play next year. And honestly, I don't think the Texans should allow him to play next year because he would have to be rushing back and putting himself at greater risk. I think Tank's future is very much in question right now. And it's awful for him, but I do think his future is very much in question right now. And as a result, I think Texans need to have a veteran receiver who sticks around or comes in, and they need to draft a receiver. And I don't think that's necessarily the end of it. I think they have some decisions to make with Robert Woods, with John Mechie, with Xavier Hutchinson. I think there's decisions to be made there.
If you bring back Johnson, are you giving up on Diggs? Not giving up on Diggs, but moving on from Diggs?
I think there's a question about moving on from Diggs because he's going to be coming off of significant injury. And the offense never seemed to flow right with Nico and Diggs in the offense at the same time. Now, whether that is a Bobby Slowick issue, very possible, or whether that was an issue of trying to satisfy two guys who are number one receivers, it didn't seem to work the way it would, that we all hoped it would. I think with Stephon Diggs, you're kind of looking at the exact same thing. One, how ready is he going to be for the start of the season? B, are you willing to accept Nico Collins as the number one guy and it's not you? And then on top of that, are you willing to play on something of a prove-it contract because you did just come off a major injury? Or are you out trying to find the most dollars you can get? If you're trying to find the most dollars you can get, listen, I hope you get them. You're just not going to get them here.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. Yeah. If he takes a team-friendly deal, I'm all for it. But I'm not giving you $20 million. I'm not giving you anything close to that. I'm just sorry. I think as the year went on, maybe he was used this way, but he was a solid number two receiver, like a solid number two receiver. He was not a number one. Even when Nico was out, he wasn't a number one receiver. Like he didn't take over a game, right? He was just really good at possession. He didn't go down the field and take shots, and he wasn't the prime and like in Buffalo, right? He would catch a 60-yard bomb and he's running to the end zone with his hands up. Like we didn't see that. And it could have been the offensive scheme. It could have been an offensive scheme, but I just don't think as he gets closer to his in his 30, I believe he's in his 30s now, right? He's 30 years old. Like he's not the number one guy. So if he's going to take number two money, number three money, and be willing to be continue to be that great teammate he was in the locker room because his teammates love him. I would be all for bringing him back. Now I don't know if I want him and Deontay because I just don't know if the and it depends who the offensive coordinator is, right? Maybe if they're bringing a Doug Peterson or somebody that can play with different stuff and they can handle that, maybe. But I feel like they're kind of the same, maybe the same guy, and they might want this. I think they might butt heads a little bit.
No, I feel like if you're talking about having both those guys, number one, I think with Stephon Diggs, you're talking about is he willing to take like
Mhm.
Robert Woods made $9 million this year? Is he willing to take a contract like that?
Is he willing to take time? Yes, yes,
And you know,
yes,
is Steph
yes.
willing to be a slot receiver?
Hmm.
Is Deontay willing to be a slot receiver? Or at least mix in and out.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I think that it would be one or the other with Deontay Johnson and Stephon
Yeah.
Diggs because I don't think you want to have that many veteran guys. You need to have some young guys too.
Yeah.
And like you said, the idea of guys butting heads over fighting over, targets. I feel like that might have been a part of the issue that Bobby Slow just didn't know how to handle early in the year. And like whichever guy that you decide to come in, whether it's one of those two guys or somebody else, they have to understand they're coming in as a number two receiver.
Hmm.
Obviously, Deontay a little younger and obviously healthier right now. Would probably be the lean, but I wouldn't be opposed to bringing Diggs back if it's the right contract with the right mindset.
Hmm.
And again, you got to draft a guy, and there's a lot of guys to draft. I mean, the wide receiver is the deepest position in like every draft now because
Hmm.
all the best athletes are all receivers.
Hmm.
They're all getting out of being running backs. They're all receivers. Those are your best athletes. And man, there's 15, 20 receivers come out in every draft who, run real fast and catch everything. And it's just a matter of, what kind of opportunities they're going to get and, what's their, what kind of commitment are they able to make when you get to that next level to see, who are the guys who can succeed and who don't. But I mean, hell, Lad McConkey of the Chargers, rookie, over 1,000 yards this year. And, it's, he wasn't, he wasn't, the Marvin Harrison Jr. of this class.
Hmm.
Marvin Harrison Jr. didn't have 1,000 yards, but,
Hmm.
does anybody think he's not going to be a big time receiver?
Hmm.
So, part of it is what is your opportunity, but we're seeing more and more young receivers get big opportunities early. We saw it last year with Tank Dell. Tank Dell had a lot of opportunity. If Tank doesn't get hurt, he's over 1,000 yards easy last year.
Yeah, for sure. For
So
sure.
I think
For sure.
there's more wide receiver depth in the draft with each passing year that you can find a wide receiver in the first few rounds.
Agreed. Totally
Um,
agree.
CJ Stroud, 6'6", commanded the offense. Haven't seen him that efficient. Haven't seen him with that much juice. He
Mm.
seemed like he was playing with that kind of kid enthusiasm that we saw a lot from him last year that we didn't see as much from him this year, mainly because he was probably getting his ass kicked all the time. It's hard to be enthusiastic when you're getting your face kicked in. But CJ seemed to have that little extra bounce in his step this week. How much of that do you think can carry over? Where is CJ Stroud right now in your eyes going into the postseason?
He seemed relaxed yesterday for the first time in a while. He didn't seem tense. He seemed comfortable in the pocket. He seemed like he was having fun playing the game. And I feel like I haven't seen that type of CJ since maybe last season. Just being honest with you, like he was just a confident player. He seemed like nothing bothered him. He was unshaken. And yesterday, when you looked at him, he kind of gave you that old frame of mind, like, okay, this is a good look for CJ. Then he goes out there and goes 6 for 6 and is having the ball on the sideline. So this is something I think he can build on. This is something I think you can truly see come next week. The problem for him is it's going to be a much better defense next week. It's going to be a hungrier defense this week. One thing about Jim Harbaugh, is it Jim or John? I always mix them up. John is in
John is
Baltimore.
in Baltimore.
So I was right. It was Jim. Yeah. Jim finds ways to motivate his team. Like he got this Charger team really believing they can win and go far. And it's only year one, right? There's going to be a challenge because that defense is going to be coming and humming. But I truly believe he can build off what we did yesterday, or what he did yesterday, excuse me, and just have that relaxed demeanor, that fun, like you mentioned, the juice that he had. Some of the plays, I think he threw a third down to Nico on the sideline. I'm like, there we go. That's the accuracy that we're used to seeing. That's the CJ from week one when they played the Colts on that sideline throw. That's what we want to see, right? So
That's the
I
back
think
shoulder throw.
yeah, yep. That's what we want to see, man. Like that's the type of stuff we want to see, and we're used to seeing. So if he can build off that and get this going next week or this upcoming weekend, I think it can be huge. Um, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. The lights are going to be bright. But one thing about CJ, I'll say this. I'll say this besides the Christmas game. One thing about CJ, when the lights are the brightest, he shines. When the lights are on the brightest, he shines. Whether it's going back to college, in the college football playoffs, whether it was in any pro game, when the lights are the brightest, he shines pretty well. So I'm expecting him to have a huge game this week. I don't care what's going on. I think he's going to play well. This off what we've seen from last Sunday.
Do you think that there was a hangover effect from the Tank injury that kind of lingered over this team for an extra game that they had to work out of their system?
Um, I think I would say yes, but I think it's more of the 3 games in 11 days. Like going into that Christmas game, they had what through 2 days to prepare, 3 days to prepare. Said you in your mind, yes, you're going through that Tank injury. It was like a disaster, and then you got to get ready for another physical game in 2 to 3 days. Um, and I think it was a mixture of both, right? I think it was a mixture of both. I had no problem with CJ being vulnerable on the field and crying and showing his that gentle side of him, his caring side, right? But I think what he has to learn is he has to be able to have a little shorter memory. Like you have to have a short memory, and that's tough because that's your brother, right? That you were on the field with, that's your friend off the field. But you can tell the difference after he caught that touchdown, he threw that touchdown, excuse me, and then the rest of the game, he never really bounced back. He never really was the same CJ from even that Kansas City game. Um, so I do think he needs to have a quicker turnaround in his head, which is hard to say. I get that. It's hard. It's hard to say. Easier for me to say than actually him, in that moment being there. But to answer your question, I say that because yes, I do think there was some type of hangover from that. I do think that was some type of they really depend on Tank. They really depend on how his aura in the locker room, how he loves his teammates, how he gives them a chance on the field every time he touches the ball. So I do think that was a huge hit, but I also think this is the third game in 11 days. Multiple guys going down, multiple injuries just caught up to him, and Baltimore was rolling, coming in hot.
Cecil, it said Lad McConkey had over 1,000 yards receiving for the Chargers this year. No other Chargers receiver had over 600 yards. Would you have Derek Stingley Jr. shadow McConkey in this game, follow him around the field, and he's gonna face up, make McConkey face up with Sting the whole game, and then you let everybody else handle everything else?
I don't know, because Kamari McConkey went to Georgia, right?
Yeah.
Kamari might know him best. Like Kamari might know his in and out, like his might know his route tree better than anybody else because they practice against each other, they played against each other all the time in practice. So that could be a mental thing. Like, man, hey, I lock this dude up every day at Georgia. Like, he can't get off the ball on me, right? So that may be a thing. Like, hey, let me get him, coach. Um, but I do see where you're coming from. I'm not scared of. This may sound crazy. I'm not nervous about Justin Herbert. I'm not nervous about Ladd when it comes to their offense. It's more of their run game that makes me nervous, right? So yeah, I'm comfortable putting Stingley on Ladd and letting him take him out the game completely. But also you got to worry about J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards and those guys. They're gonna run the football. Like Harbaugh wants to be physical. He wants to punch you in the mouth. He wants to literally punch you in the mouth and say, "Hey, this is what we're going to do to you over and over and over and over." Then we'll play action and find Lad. Then we'll play action and find our tight end. Then we'll take a shot down to QJ down the field. But he wants to punch you in the mouth over and over again. That's why Herbert didn't throw many interceptions this year because he didn't have to. He just turned around, boom, 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 play action, find his guys, his possession guys. So I would love to see Stingley on him. I'm comfortable with Stingley or Kamari Lassiter on Lad. Just being honest. Um, but the run game is what's going to be like. You got to stop that run game. You got to stop that run game. If you can stop that run game and try to make them one dimensional, I think you're in good shape. But if you don't stop the run game, you're going to be in some trouble.
Do you want to keep a linebacker as a spy on Herbert so that he can't use his legs and just break, contain, and take off and make big yardage on broken plays?
I do. I do. You know what? You know what? You mentioned linebacker. You know what I was thinking about? This is kind of random. Aziz was suspended for 3 games. And a normal suspension, 3 games would be like basically 21 days. Him being suspended for those 3 games is only 11 days. So we got him back in the locker room, which he's one of the leaders of the defense on the team in a shorter time span where I'm like, oh, that's really, really good. So now he can be back with his guys and truly get these guys going. Besides that point, I think Aziz, Christian, Henry, even Devin White, they're going to have to be spies, some type of a spy on Herbert, just to keep him in the pocket. If something's not there, I expect the secondary to play well, but something not there. If he can get outside the pocket and break contain, that's going to be a heartbreaker on third down. It's going to be a heartbreaker on second and long, whatever the case may be. So, yes, to answer your question, to have Aziz or Christian or Henry just being able to shadow him, and then when he comes, knock his head off, I think that would be really, really good. Even if it's sometimes a defensive tackle or end dropping back, like that can be real mobile with him as well. But I think you definitely have a spy, especially on different third down situations, to uh, keep him inside the pocket and not gain some yards.
I think this is a tough game for the Texans, but I think it's a winnable game for the Texans.
Okay.
You know, the Chargers are a very solid team, but you mentioned the defense and they excel, especially in the red zone. But outside of that, there's nothing spectacular about that team. They're a good, solid, fundamental team. Uh, but certainly a team that can be beaten. And what was probably going to be a low-scoring game, a game that we've seen the Texans defense put up some of their best efforts against top quarterbacks. Right? They held Josh Allen to 9 of 30. They intercepted Jared Goff 5 times. So we have seen them rise to the occasion against top quarterbacks in the league. It's not impossible to think, hey, the Texans can come up defensively and they can get after Justin Herbert. And they can maybe force him into doing, even if not necessarily interceptions, they can force him into being inaccurate by getting them off the spot, making him throw the ball earlier than he has to, banging around some receivers. They can be a good enough coverage team to force him to make tough throws on the run that aren't going to get completed.
Mm-hmm.
They are a good enough team that they can stand up to the run game. We've seen them do it before. And they don't have to be totally shut down. Hey, you can't get a yard. Just need to be good enough. They're not giving up chunk plays on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
They really need the offense to do what we've expected them to do all along, which is put up the points that they haven't gotten and get those chunk plays a lot more frequently than they have been. But I do think it's possible. Texans are 2.5-point dogs at home, playing on Saturday at 3:30, which we should just call the Texans playoff window, because every Texans wild card round game has been at Saturday at 3:30.
Yeah.
So we just call it the Texans playoff window, Saturday 3:30. They're 2.5-point dogs. Where are you feeling about this Texans team?
So with that question, are you asking me my prediction?
Well, let's start with where you feel about them, then get into your prediction.
Where do I feel about them? Mm, you go first. I need time to think. You go first because
Okay.
I'm iffy.
So I think this is a game that is a winnable game. I think it's
Okay.
a really tough game. I think it's a physical game. But this is a game that in their own building, if, not making the self-inflicted mistakes that we saw earlier in the season. So, for example, what was it, 5-6 games into the season, Larry Tunsil had 12 penalties. I think he's had 2 over the last 3 months. So something that regressed back towards the mean, or I should say progressed, because it got better, progressed to the mean. Laramie Tunsil stopped getting the penalties and continued to be an elite pass protector who only gave up 2 sacks all year. So elite pass protector. The interior of the line, while still not great, is probably the best it's been right now than it has been all year. And if they can avoid having Titus try to pull to catch up with blockers who are running free, because we saw that not work out last week again, the interior of that line seems to be a little more stable than it's been. CJ didn't have any kind of fear, wasn't looking down at rushers. He did that whole drive where he was, I don't want to say comfortable, but confident in the pocket. And read through his reads, executed his offense, moved the ball down the field. Going to be harder against a better team.
Yeah.
But if he has that sense about him, where he's not looking 2 feet in front of him, he's looking down the field, he can give you the chance to beat anybody. There seemed like there was a little more bounce in the Texans this past week than we've seen in many weeks. And if any of that can carry over, they could win this game 23-20. Kaimi can get you a couple of long field goals at NRG with the roof closed. He can hit a couple from 55, 56. To me, this is a game that they can win. And if they're going to win it, I think it's 23-20 Texans.
See, this is where I'm hung up on. This is why I needed to think, because I'm fully confident in the Texans defense. I'm fully confident in them. You mentioned how they stopped the run before. They've gotten, Goff, one of the better quarterbacks in the league this year, 5 interceptions. Allen shut him down. Multiple teams have played, multiple times they have stepped up to the plate and played really well on the defense side of the ball, especially as of late. I am not sold on the offense right now. I'm just not. And when you got Nick Bosa, or is it Joey Bosa's on one side?
Joey
No,
Bosa.
Joey Bosa
They
on
have
one
Joey
side,
Bosa.
and Khalil Mack on the other.
The less annoying of the Bosa brothers.
Yeah, he's more subdued. Um, I'm just not convinced. I do think you score 24, you win. If you can get 24 points, 24 points, I think you can win. I do. Now, I don't want to. I'm struggling. I don't want to get false hope from the Tennessee game, because I feel like they're teasing me. I feel like they're like putting something in my face, and it's like, but you got a chance to win. The defense is going to play well, right? I'm not sure. I'm not even sure they won't get you 1 or 2 turnovers. If you stop the run, I think you're in good shape. Besides Ladd, and Ladd's not that scary. He's a good player, but he's not scary yet. you like there's no other guys really explosive on their offense. I think you said it. There's nobody that's like standing out like, oh my gosh, they have this explosive offense or this explosive player or this explosive like nah. Khalil Mack is getting older. Joey is who he is, but Dervin James is good. But as far as affecting what we have on the outside and the run game, I think we'll match up well against him. I would say the Texans have a chance to win, but if they score between 20 and 24, but it's up to the offense. It's really up to the offense to step up and play well. If they can play well, they will win the game. If the offense struggles and cannot score at least 20 points, they won't win the football game. I think it's that simple. If you score 20 or more, you'll win. If not, you'll be out the playoffs and sitting at home with us next week. So I think if CJ and company can build off what we saw against Tennessee, I think they'll be okay. If I had to predict the score, I say somewhere about 24-17, 24-20, somewhere in there, that they'll get the W.
23 points is 2 touchdowns and 3 field goals.
Yeah. Okay.
If the Texans can get 2 touchdowns and then 3+ field goals, I think you're right. I think that's a winning combination for them.
Mm-hmm.
And importantly, I don't think the Texans gave up a play that I'm not even sure how it was possible, where Will Levis throws a ball deep down the field to 3 Texas defenders, and somehow it's caught for a touchdown. But you got to remember, every one of those guys is on the practice squad. They're not playing on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm not tripping on that.
That was, that wasn't even the 2s and the 3s. That was the 4s and the 5s out on the field. And, the one guy who's out there like backing up like he's going to catch a punt instead of attacking the football. This way you're catching the ball while moving forward. Well, I think he learned a lesson that they're probably going to work on in practice this week, at least for him. But, DB rule number 1, never backpedal on an interception. Go get it. And I think he learned a little lesson there. But none of those guys are going to be playing on Saturday. And if that situation arises, I promise Kalen Bullock is not backpedaling on that ball. He's looking at, can I get a head start so I can be 60 yards down the field in 4 seconds? So I'm not worried about that. The Texans have done a much better job of late not giving up those big pass plays, those big bomb plays. So, from that from that point of view, I think that we've seen a different side from the Texans. We're getting things regressing to the mean. They were no longer giving up those big bombs. They've kind of cut down on those big giant pass plays. So there's a lot of things that I think are trending the right way for the Texans. We just haven't seen it for a long duration. But if D'Amico's right about, hey, this is what we're seeing in practice, this is how these guys are taking their reps, this is what I expect them to do, and they do it, it's a winnable game. It's a tough game. If they don't play their best football, they're not going to win.
Yeah.
But at the same time, because it's the Chargers and not the Steelers, I expect there to be more Texans fans than non-Texans fans.
Yes.
With the Steelers, that might be the other way around. But with the Chargers, Chargers fans don't necessarily travel all that well. Hell, they don't even travel to their own stadium. So I feel like you should have a pretty good crowd supporting you Houston Texans. And look, if this team, after everything they've been through this year, if they don't come, if they're not fired up to host a playoff game, despite everything that's gone down this year, then they just don't have it in them this year. Yeah. And changes got to get made. Mm-hmm. Here is a tricky question for you, though. Does the Texans' playoff success impact your decision or your sentiment on Bobby Slowick in any fashion? If a team that couldn't score all year long suddenly puts it together in the postseason, are you putting that on Bobby or are you putting that on CJ?
I'm just gonna be honest with you. He has to do something incredible. It has to be an incredible run for my sentiment to change. Like I have to see 40 points a game. I have to see incredible in-game adjustments and stuff going on. Then I'm like, okay, where's this been at? Yes, I want you back. But I just don't see that happening. I think he's run his course, um, and I think yeah, it would take a lot, Pat. It would take a ton for me to be like, oh yeah, we need to bring him back again. I just don't see him as being the guy for next year to really take the next step to be a true Super Bowl contender. That's just my opinion.
If they're going to make a change, do you want to see them mostly keep the same staff just with a new offensive coordinator, or do you want to see a whole new offensive staff?
I'm not against a whole new offensive staff. Like I'm not against seeing everybody get a fresh face in all new places. I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. I think D'Amico and Nick can hire the right people to come in and keep the same culture that you have and find really good coaches to really get the best out of these guys. But I think it's time for a change. When you have a down year like this, and it goes the way it went, it definitely needs to happen at the OC position, but I think the other positions as well. It needs some kick fire up under their behind.
He is Cecil Shorts III, former Houston Texans wide receiver, 6-year NFL veteran. I'm Patrick Creighton, host of Area 45 on Sports Radio 610, your flagship home of the Houston Texans. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Believe in Texans podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Texans and the Chargers Saturday at 3:30 Wild Card Weekend. Get started off with your Houston Texans. It'll be it'll be an exciting. It should be a very exciting game. So like I said, I think this is a close game. No matter what, I think it's a very
Mhm.
close game, and hopefully the excitement is in the right direction for those of us here in Houston. So appreciate you supporting the Believe in Texans podcast, and hopefully we will see you next time talking about another game and not a season recap. For Cecil Shorts III, I'm Patrick Creighton saying, go Texans!